They attack some of the most important symbols in our country, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon.
At least in our city and locally anyway. But Barbara Nevins from UPN 9, our sister station, I don't think Barbara can hear me, but go ahead, Barbara. Tell us what you can see from your point.
I've been down here since a little after 9 o'clock, and every time I thought it could not get worse, it has. I was very close to the World Trade Center, right underneath the North Tower at Barclay in Washington. You could see debris falling from it like sparkles. People were in the windows waving white flags trying to get out, and then suddenly people started to jump. The jumpers began a little after 9:30 and continued way up until 10 o'clock. At about 10 o'clock there was a man about 5 stories from the top of the building waving a white flag from the corner on the west side of the building. A helicopter came close, and then suddenly police officers I was standing with said, "Run, run, the building is collapsing." Actually, I don't know if the helicopter bombed the building at that point or crashed into it, if that was a third attack. However, parts of the building, big chunks of the building, began to collapse. Everybody ran back from the street. We were just 1 block north of the World Trade Tower at that point. We moved back, ran back. People were running, people were crying, people were saying that their friends were trapped in the building. We're back now at about Chambers and Greenwich Streets, and suddenly more people start jumping. There were at least 5, 6 bodies just jumping, and people were gasping in the crowd saying, "Please, please, please." They did want to see these people jump. They did want them to jump. Others were saying, "What can they do? It's a choice between burning alive and jumping." It was really, truly one of the most horrible things that I had ever seen. We started to move back. We walked 10 blocks, and then suddenly big North Tower seemed to rumble. We looked back. There was white smoke and sparkles, and the building was collapsing. People in the streets were running. We had been right there, right under the building. This is really, truly one of the most horrible things that I have ever seen. Back to you in the studio. We'll be here all day trying to report, to tell you what's been going on.
Barbara Nevins Taylor from UPN 9 News, our sister station, reporting the devastation that she saw from her vantage point. Joe?
Jim, getting back to what Rosanna was saying, the World Trade Center, everybody in this city knows somebody who works there.
That's right.
And many of those people who were involved in this calamity today were there in 1993 when the terrorists tried to take down the towers. You know, in some way, you think maybe that attack gave people a false sense of security, knowing that at that time those 2 towers stayed.
But also, would they ever strike it again? I mean, to go back again and hit the World Trade Center.
Well, let's ask our expert about that. Does that surprise you that they would choose the same target again, Joe?
No. I mean, they did it then. They did it to make a point, and now they've made their point. They've destroyed it completely. Now we've got to be careful, and now we have to be at a stage where we start to be much more careful of what we do and how we do it, and we have to start to look at these people who are involved in it. We'll give up some of our liberties, but we'll protect ourselves much better.
We've got to worry about all those people down in Lower Manhattan who, I mean, you know, from the pictures that we see, it's just covered in smoke. It's just billowing out and billowing out. It doesn't seem to end. I mean, how can you fight a fire? How can you rescue people in that area? I mean, I don't think they could have been prepared for that.
Well, I think the only way they could have prepared for it is by, as you mentioned earlier, Joe, by infiltration of these organizations and somehow getting word that this was going to happen. But apparently, every indication so far, we were just simply sandbagged by this, blindsided.
Absolutely.
And what we have to do now is 2 things. One, aside from putting ourselves together and remaining calm and not a total panic, start to resurrect what we have, but then start to institute some type of control and some care. Hopefully the president's plane will be escorted, because who knows what other hijacked plane could fly at Air Force One. Hopefully they'll be careful. But this is a day. It's not a week or a month. After this day, we'll regroup. And we have to start to be much more careful and more prepared.
Put yourself in the position now. You're in the business. You're a pro. Put yourself in the business of the guys who have to make decisions now when they're sitting down. What do they do? What's the first step the people responsible for reacting to this tragedy take?
Well, I think the first step you take is to protect the people and the sources and resources that you have, that you need. The president, the major offices, the office holders. And then you start to regroup, and then you start to gather. I mean, you have to do a number of things at the same time. You have to keep the country going. You have to protect the major people who are involved in the country. And then you have to start to figure out how this happened how you're going to catch the people that did it, and how you're going to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Heightened vigilance is something you're really going to have to do, and you're going to have to do it very, very quickly.
That was one of the first things when we heard the president speak this morning. He says, we will go after these people, we will get these people. But how many times in the past have we heard these same words?
Well, we've heard them, and they have, in fact, identified people who've been responsible for major problems, whether it's the World Trade Center bombing in '93, whether it's the coal incident. We know who's involved. That will get them. I think that message tells the country, don't worry, we're going to have a heightened effect. But I think it's much more important, or equally important, to say to the country, we will go forward, we will keep ourselves intact, we will not be immobilized by this. The financial district's immobilized, as Joe said, because of what's happened there. It'll get cleaned up and it'll go forward again. That's the more important thing. You have to do all those things at once.
Would you say we are officially at war now?
No, that's not for me to say. I think we are officially now initiated in domestic violence in the United States, apparently from outside sources or inside sources, in a way we never believed was possible before, in a way that people said could happen, and we said no, it wouldn't. And while we had skirmishes in World War II, and we had submarine incidents in World War II, and we had sabotage in World War II, from that time to the present, notwithstanding the World Trade Center incident in '93, we never really had devastation. Today we're exposed to having real devastation.
Primary Day will never be the same again in this city, in this country.
Lieutenant, I must say that one of the issues in the mayoral campaign was the security around City Hall, closing off City Hall to the public. And I must say, I was one of the people who said that that's a terrible thing to do. I'm not sure anymore.
It makes you, sit back and think. I have a question, though, for you, to Mr. Jaffe. You say we need to go in and infiltrate these organizations and get these people. And you sit back and you, even as a journalist myself, I have to say, you sit back, you watch coverage of a reporter getting in to interview the likes of Osama bin Laden, but the United States can't find him to get him.
Right.
That presents a real problem. You look at that and you say, well, what?
I can't tell you I have the inside track on any of that, and it may well be that people know where he could be, and it may well be that the government's not in a position to react to that. There are a lot of things that interact, and reporters frequently can get sources. Raise a different issue, if you would. If you have the sources and you have the internal
why don't you
control,
turn them over?
Are you willing to turn them over? And that's a whole different issue, which we may regrettably have to start to rethink at this juncture.
John Rowland is down in the newsroom. John?
All right, thanks, Jim. Just a couple of things. Number one, and perhaps the very most important thing I'm going to say to you today, is an awful lot of people need an awful lot of help, and that means blood. So if it's possible, if you're able to go to your nearest blood bank, do so. Go and donate blood. An awful lot of it is needed. Now, the nearest one in the neighborhood of Channel 5, where we are, is at 67th Street, right off of 2nd Avenue. We're going to try to get up a phone number for you for the different blood banks around. Perhaps there's an 800 number for all of them. Otherwise, we'll try to get as many ones as we can for you locally. So if you can, please donate blood. Number two, we said earlier there was an explosion at the NYU Medical Center. That turns out not to be true. There was not an explosion at the NYU Medical Center. Number three, the election is canceled for today for obvious reasons. There will be no primary today. That is canceled. No word on when it will be rescheduled. Yasser Arafat has condemned these attacks. We're told that he has come out just recently and condemned these attacks. Israel has evacuated all of her embassies around the world. All of Israel's embassies have been evacuated around the world. Back here in our country, a plane, possibly a 767, that's a large plane, has gone down in Pennsylvania, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. We don't know if that is related to what is going on. In Connecticut, all the state and government buildings there are being evacuated just as a precaution. We don't have any information out of Connecticut other than this is just being done as a precaution. In Newark, the same thing is happening. The Rodino government building there has been evacuated. Again, the primary has been called off. Yasser Arafat has condemned these attacks. Israel has evacuated all of her embassies around the world for now. That's the latest information, Jim, that we have for you from here.
All right, John, you mentioned the importance of donating blood, and you mentioned that one of the blood centers was very close to us here in Channel 5, and we have in our studio right now Michael Washington from the Red Cross. Mike, good morning.
Good morning.
Now, you're just down the block from us here. First of all, if folks want to donate blood to help in the aftermath of this tragedy, what's the number to call?
They should go and call 1-800-933-BLOOD, and that's presuming that the phone lines work. And I'm sure that the phone lines will be overwhelmed, so I would just ask everybody to be patient with the process. They can also go directly to a blood center. The nearest blood center, as mentioned before, is right here at 67th, just off of 2nd Avenue.
Do you know a few other places? Maybe you can mention them so
Well,
this way.
the other places that are going to be open is at 150 Amsterdam Avenue, which is in the west side. We're also in the process of opening Columbia Presbyterian's Medical Center, which is at 168th and Broadway. And I believe we're in the process of also opening 53rd and Lex, which is in the City Court building.
Mike, do you have any places outside the city, in Queens, Brooklyn?
In Brooklyn, we have a facility in downtown Brooklyn at 120 Lawrence Street. And then we have facilities in New Jersey and also on Long Island. And if you go to the website, which is nybloodcenter.org, and you can find all of those locations.
So nybloodcenter.org. Okay,
Right.
that's presuming that the internet's up.
That's right.
Haven't
And
heard any
it
word
should
on
be
that.
known that right now we have a good fair amount of blood to handle this emergency. We've also been in contact with other agencies to assist us in bringing blood in from other locations. So we're in good shape. We don't by any means want to start a panic, but we would like everyone that can assist to assist.
Any particular type of blood that's more
Sure.
necessary than others?
People with O type and B would be the types that we would need the most at this particular moment.
And if you have a cold and stuff, should you not even bother?
Right.
or-
If you have a cold, don't bother to donate. But otherwise, if you're healthy and you're between the ages of 18 and 65 or 17 and 65, please come down and donate.
All right, Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michael Washington, give us that number once again, the 1-800 number.
1-800-933-BLOOD, and you can go to the website for locations, which is nybloodcenter.org.
Okay, again, nybloodcenter.org.
Yes.
All right, Michael, thank you very much
Thank you.
for coming
Thank
in.
you.
And of course, the need for blood results from that terrible, terrible catastrophe you're looking at right now. There's the aftermath. Those clouds are what is left of the World Trade Center. Just before 9 o'clock this morning, a plane crashed into the side of 2 World Trade Center. Then minutes later, another plane crashed into the other tower. There is a live picture of that. I'm sorry, there is a taped picture of that second plane crashing into the other tower of the World Trade Center. And then shortly after that, in Washington, another plane, all 3 of them hijacked apparently. Another plane crashed into the Pentagon building in Washington, into this nation's military complex, the military nerve center of our country. President Bush was in Florida. He immediately boarded Air Force One and headed for Washington. He will be returning there very shortly. And a terrible 1, 2, 3 terrorist attack on our country has taken place this morning. We have not yet heard from Mayor Giuliani since this started. We heard at one point that the mayor would be holding a news conference as soon as possible. We are concerned because the mayor's
Emergency people.
his
Command
emergency
center.
bunker, they
His
call
lifeline.
it, is in, I think, Tower 5 of the World Trade Center, which is very close to Ground Zero. So presumably their communications have been knocked out, and we certainly hope that the mayor or any of his emergency personnel have not been injured. Dick Oliver was down at City Hall covering what seems like a decade ago, the primary election, when the story broke. Ollie?
Yes, Jim. We're now down at NYU Downtown Hospital, the old Beekman Downtown Hospital. I was heading here to try to get a look at what kind of injuries were coming in when I don't know what it was, but it was a huge sound. I think it was the facade of the building falling. After that, thousands, literally thousands of people came roaring down the streets, many of them fully in panic, shrieking and screaming, heading towards the hospital. The hospital immediately opened its doors and to get as many people as it could into the lobby and hallways and other areas, and immediately handed out surgical masks water and began treating people, some for cardiac cases, many others for breathing problems. Jim, it's very difficult to explain, but imagine a snowstorm of, say, 5 inches. The streets are covered, the cars are covered with this gray-white soot that unfortunately people are being forced to breathe. It is severely affecting people here. As far as the trauma cases being brought here by ambulance, there are all kinds of cases ranging from broken bones to trauma to heart cases to cardiac cases to lung cases. The hospital is overwhelmed, but handling everyone who comes here. Do you have any questions at this point, Jim?
I don't, Ollie. Just stay there. I know you're doing a yeoman's job down there, so thank you very much, and we'll get back to you very shortly. Right now, we're going to go to UPN 9's Barbara Nevins-Taylor, our sister station. She is reporting once again live from the scene. Barbara?
Hi, this is Barbara Nevins-Taylor. I'm at the corner of Broome and 6th Avenue. We're north of what were the World Trade Towers. We have seen them collapse. I'm here with Dawn Michaels. She was coming out of the subway, going to work from her home in Far Rockaway. She got out at Chambers Street. And Dawn, what did you see?
Well, as I was walking down the street, I happened to hear like an engine sound, and the plane was like, as if it was going really fast, and I didn't think of anything, so I kept on walking. All of a sudden, you heard a loud explosion, so we all ran to look. And the first building was a big hole on the side of it, and on the other side went in flames. So we stood there in shock, everyone screaming. A woman collapsed on me. I had to lay her down on my textbooks. And then before you know it, out of nowhere, the next building blew up. And then all of a sudden, everyone's running all over the place, a panic attack. Then after a few while later, all of a sudden, people are running hysterical, and we go to look, and the building collapsed. So we're running, and we're trying to run against...
a long time later that the building collapsed. People have been running all morning.
Yeah.
That's the really shocking thing, is that people have been moving back from the World Trade Towers all morning. Just when you thought you might be safe, suddenly you were no longer safe because another portion of the building started to explode or fell off, and then the towers actually collapsed. You were also here very early in the... What did it sound like exactly?
It sounded just like a plane, but I looked up to see where it was coming from and couldn't tell. And all of a sudden, that big explosion, I mean, you know, it just happened. And I pretty much had to run, leave everything. There was smoke that just blasted from that building, and I couldn't stay there. I realized I couldn't stay because I knew it would have cost me my life, so I left.
Yeah. Maybe Tim can take a look at you, because you're covered with dust, and this is what it's been like in Lower Manhattan all morning long. I mean, there is dust and debris throughout the streets of Lower Manhattan. It is just, people are covered with dust. This gentleman over here, do you want to step forward? You look like you might have gotten caught in something. Can you tell us what happened?
I work in the World Trade Center.
Tell me your name, sir.
My name is Richard Dove.
Richard, where are you from?
I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
And tell us what happened.
I heard about it on the news, and I came down to see was any of my co-workers hurt. I'm due at work at 10 o'clock. I work in the World Trade Center from 10 to 6. I'm a messenger. And I came down to see if they were okay. And we were standing on Wall Street and Broadway when the burning part, debris started to fall, and everybody started running for their lives. I was caught up in the smoke and the debris and fell. I lost my glasses. There are a lot of people back there who are hurt, who got stampeded over.
Because a lot of people were running, a lot of people were running.
Nobody could help nobody because you couldn't see anything. It was just running in a big black ball of smoke. You couldn't see where you were going.
Yeah, I was about 3 blocks from the World Trade Tower when it actually collapsed, and that was the shocking thing. It came down with such fury. It was sudden. Police yelled, "Watch out, watch out." And then the building started to collapse, and it was sparkles and smoke and dark smoke, and you couldn't escape the debris. You couldn't escape. People were really running for their lives. This was horrible, horrible. I mean, I'm using that word, and it sounds dramatic, but there is nothing dramatic about it when you're out in the street.
You can't imagine being caught up in that like that. I was running for my life.
Yes, sir, we have some more folks here who... Oh, no? All right, sir, what happened to you?
I want to go to the hospital. I'm dying. I'm bleeding.
Well, we need to get you to the hospital. What happened? Where were you, sir?
I was just coming to the building.
You were just coming to the building?
On Broadway.
But you were not in the World Trade Tower?
No, with the next boom drop again.
I need some help.
All right, well, you need to get to St. Vincent's. You need to get to St. Vincent's. I think we're just a few blocks for St. Vincent's. Can somebody help him to get to St. Vincent's? Can somebody help this man? Obviously, somebody's bandaged his hand. Can you take him up? It's just a few blocks up. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're obviously out here in the street where people are very confused. It's been a very frightening morning, and we'll continue to report from the corner of Broome and 6th Avenue where people are moving up north from the World Trade Tower area. Right now, I'm Barbara Nevins-Taylor reporting live.
Barbara, thank you very much. John Rowland has more from the newsroom. John?
Well, we have some good news about the mayor, Jim. We were worried earlier about his whereabouts, whether or not he had been involved in this explosion at the World Trade Center, because that's where there is a command center. There's word that he is fine, and word from him from somewhere in lower Manhattan right now. A horrendous amount of people killed in these explosions. He's asking everyone in New York City to stay calm and to pray. And he said that every resource is being used to save lives. So those words from the mayor just a few minutes ago. The Securities and Exchange Commission is closed today. The primary has been called off, as I said earlier. The phone company, Verizon, says their phone service is working, but they're asking you, please don't use the phone, your phone, for anything other than an emergency. More security, a heightened sense of security at the State House in Trenton, New Jersey now. Twice the number of state troopers who usually guard there. The buildings in Connecticut have been evacuated. They're on alert there too. And once again, the New York Blood Center, the hotline there, if you're able to donate blood, you can call 1-800-933-BLOOD. That's 2566, 933-BLOOD. Or if you know where your local blood donation center is, just head over that way. You're going to need an awful lot of blood for this case. And as the mayor has said, a horrendous amount, to use his words, a horrendous amount of people may have been killed today. Jim, back to you.
We were all fearful of using a word like that, John, but I don't think we can come to any other conclusion. We spoke earlier on the phone with Tom O'Hara, who was an eyewitness. Tom is also an architect. Tom, you there? Tom O'Hara, are you there?
Yes, I am, Jim.
Tom, good morning once again. From the standpoint of an architect,
yes.
Can you give us some idea of what happened to this building?
Yes, these two buildings were built, designed with a tube-in-tube structure, which basically means that there's a core where there's the elevators and the fire stairs, and then there's no more columns until you get to the exterior, which gives you a very flexible column-free plate. The only other buildings that it's not as common as other high-rises that we work on. However, the other buildings that I can name to you would be the Hancock Tower in Boston, the Sears Tower in Chicago, and the Petronas Towers in Malaysia, which are the largest buildings in the world.
Now, would these kinds of structures be more solid, be less prone to collapse?
It's a tough question to answer, but I would say that once the exterior tube was violated by whether it was the airplane or the explosions, I would say that the structure would be more quickly, dramatically impacted. And I believe that's in part what might happen. I work with structural engineers all the time, and they are experts. But clearly, everybody knows the World Trade Centers, which were designed by Arata Isozaki. He wanted a column-free space to make it easy for the plane into these floors. But we were up on my roof again when the two buildings went down.
And so, obviously, your fears were realized. What would you say would be the difference between the impact of these two planes today and the earlier impact back in '93 when there was an explosion in the garage?
I think because it was down in the foundations, there were probably more columns down in the basement, in and around the sub levels, as opposed to the top of the building, which probably threw the whole building out of balance.
All right, Tom, thank you very much. Again, Tom O'Hara was an eyewitness earlier this morning and also an architect, giving us an idea of why that building was structurally undermined by those blasts. Kimberly Richardson came into our studio just moments ago. Obviously, you've been through the thick of it. Kimberly, what are your experiences?
I live in the area of Gramercy Park, and the feeling right now on the streets is unbelievable. People are walking around in shock. People are crying. Now, this is in the area of the 20s, so nowhere near the buildings. On their cell phones. I live, you have to excuse the sweat, because I live in the area of Gramercy Park. I came down to First Avenue to try and get a cab. There are no cabs. Anything coming north from the area of downtown and lower Manhattan, whatever got down there, but whatever's coming back is not coming back. All the cabs are full. I was able to finally ask a nice gentleman to get me in a cab. I got up, coming up First Avenue. Well, the UN is there. The streets are full. Traffic around the UN. We went underneath the tunnel. We didn't go on First Ave around the UN, but the area is, I heard demonstrators, I heard megaphones. I don't know if that's related to what's happening. I couldn't tell, I couldn't see it. But again, the traffic in the tunnel comes to a standstill, which I'm in this cab, I'm thinking, in a tunnel near the UN, not a good place, but there's nothing you could do. We finally get out of the tunnel, and traffic again came to a standstill around 47th Street and First Avenue. You couldn't do anything. I jumped out of the cab. We came over to 3rd to get up to the studios on 67th, and I had to run and walk the whole way up. 3rd Avenue to the 59th Street Bridge, solid traffic, up to about 57th Street. Then it's wide open. Very few cars are getting through. People are walking in the streets. They're walking in the sidewalks. People are coming up out of the subways because the subways aren't running. People, again, on their cell phones. And the eerie thing, you're walking uptown on 3rd Avenue, not thinking much. You turn around, you look behind you, you see the plume of smoke right down 3rd Avenue, even in the 60s. So just kind of a chaotic but calm scene, a very eerie feeling out there right now. People are unbelievable.
That's what you said earlier, surreal.
It's surreal. New Yorkers are tough, but even this is, you know, breaking down that toughness a little bit.
A lot of times when catastrophes happen, New Yorkers come together. What was the feeling of the people when you were out on the street? Were they looking to help one another, or just in plain panic?
Plain panic and shock. Just dazed, walking around, kind of looking and listening. People were out of their cars. They had the radio on. They're listening to the up-to-date reports. Just kind of a strange, no one's panicked, but yet just in shock. In shock.
It's just like something out of a movie.
Who would think that New York, the United States, would ever be a target to terrorists like this?
Well, that was the fear on the part of a lot of people, and apparently it has come to pass.
You know, it's something you mentioned.
Let me just interrupt you one second, please, Lynn, because we have Brian Leary down in the newsroom. We raised the question some time ago about what is the internet like. Brian, can you answer that question? Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have it, so you can answer.
No, I was just, you were saying you were in the cab and there were people demonstrating by the United Nations.
You could hear them up above. Again, we were in the tunnel, so I couldn't see, but you could hear megaphones, you could hear yelling. I could see right before I went in the tunnels, the whole area around the UN, hundreds of people.
Now, excuse me again, I'm being very rude here.
That's okay, Jim. That's all right.
But Brian Leary is going to tell us what's the internet like since this tragedy struck.
Thanks so much, Jim. Here in the newsroom, as you know, all the phones they've been sporadic. People can't get in, they can't get out. And once again, the internet is proving to be invaluable. I've gotten several messages. I was lucky enough to be able to tell some of my friends and relatives that I was okay because everyone was worried. And from there, we have jumped over into people telling me from around the country, from Pennsylvania, Oregon, Florida, from here in the city, just what's going on. Basically, everyone's in a state of shock. Everyone's panicked about their loved ones. They don't know what's going to happen next. So the internet is proving to be invaluable as far as me getting more and more connections as where buildings are closing down. And as soon as we get more, I've gotten over 50 emails just on human interest stories and other connections. I'll get back to you, Jim.
So the internet working. The internet working. This is encouraging, at least. Small ray of hope here that we can get through this without. I interrupted you before, Kimberly, where you were recounting your experience over outside the United Nations.
Again, hundreds of people up on top of the tunnel, but I couldn't see because we were in the cab, but I heard demonstrators, I heard a lot of yelling, and even the cab driver said, well, what is that, what is that? He turned to me. I said, I don't know, I'm here with you. So I don't know if that's related to what happened or what's going on. Another thing, cell phones. I tried several times. You can't get through.
Yeah, it's in and out.
United Nations.
Yep.
It's a building that you would worry.
Yes.
You know, worry about, worry for its
safety. But you know, maybe it's a symbol of the world, whereas the World Trade Center is a symbol of the United States, New York, strength, power, so much a part of our skyline. Forever gone.
Yeah. All right, Dick Oliver is down close to Ground Zero at what we used to call Beekman downtown, Ellie?
That's right, Jim. It's now called NYU downtown, just about 2 or 3 blocks from City Hall. And It's amazing what the scene is here. People, this has become a place for people to gather for help as far as breathing is concerned, as far as cardiac cases, and there was a number of cases, at least 100 people brought in for trauma by ambulance from the scene, from the World Trade Center. Right now, they're handing out water, trying to get people in off the streets. That's where the breathing problems begin. People are walking around with surgical masks. The streets are virtually empty. Once in a while you see an emergency vehicle go back and forth, but it's really a ghost town in lower Manhattan as far as the general public is concerned. We'll continue to stay on the line here and bring you anything else we can, Jim.
Ollie, are there any people that you can talk to, any people you have talked to describe what they went through when this tragedy struck?
Well, a number of the people were just witnesses watching the fires as we were, Jim, when the facade of the building came down, and that set off incredible panic. Thousands of people rushing. Most that I saw were rushing towards the east side of the lower Manhattan, and that's where I wound up. I was down here checking on the cases that were being brought in here by ambulance. People saw people jumping from the building itself. People saw people being hit by debris. We're talking about people's arms being hit, people's legs. Some people's bodies were on the sidewalks, and there was a general panic. I can't make it back up there now, but we will when we can. The police have managed to get virtually everyone who is not an emergency worker out of the area.
Thank you very much, and continue to do a fine job down there. Just to bring you up to date, in case you turned on your television set expecting to see something else and you ran into this, we will tell you that shortly before 9 o'clock this morning, a plane was deliberately piloted into the World Trade Center, Tower 2. Then minutes later, another plane, there's the second plane, deliberately crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center, Tower 1. Then, sometime later, in Washington, another plane crashed into the Pentagon. All obviously terrorist attacks. And an outfit called the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine has claimed responsibility. As of right now, all ways into Manhattan are closed. You cannot come in by a bus or a tunnel or a subway or a bridge, and you cannot get into Manhattan. And in Washington, where they had their other terrorist activity, every building of any importance has been evacuated. They're also evacuating buildings, federal office buildings in cities across the country. We've had a statement from Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian leader, who has condemned this terrorist attack. And we also understand that the state of Israel has closed and evacuated its embassies around the world. And here in New York, we are simply in a state of devastation. The mayor came on some time ago and he said, quote, I have a sense it's a horrendous number of lives lost.
Someone needs to maybe try to get us some information, because we are trying to find out and get more information on this Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, because they have claimed responsibility for all of this carnage.
And also, we might add that no small consideration, that these were all commercial flights, 3 commercial flights that were hijacked, one in Boston, 2 from other places, maybe one in Newark. And these were all fairly big commercial jets. I know in one instance it was hijacked from Boston, and there was a passenger list of 158 people plus a crew of 10. So 168 people in the plane alone lost their lives. And that's just one of the 3. We can't begin to imagine the dimensions of this tragedy.
We are being told that American Airlines has confirmed that it has had 2 of its planes crash, and that United also may have had a plane crash. We don't have all of the details behind those.
Yeah, John Rowland mentioned earlier that a plane crashed in western Pennsylvania, fairly close to Washington.
And didn't we hear about a U.S. airplane in the Pentagon? I don't know if that's confirmed as well.
It was a U.S. airplane that crashed into the Pentagon.
Oh, it wasn't U.S. Air.
Okay. Now, Mario Bosques?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Jim. I'm
What's
here
up?
at Beekman Hospital downtown, not far from that area, as they continue to evacuate people here. We get reports of firefighters coming in with various injuries here to Beekman Hospital, along with civilians. People are being handed out masks, and they're covered in whatever they can, plastic, because this entire area, Jim, is blanketed in several inches of debris and ash. It's very hard to breathe in this area, and streams of people are exiting. You're seeing, women, grown men crying as they walk along the streets, everyone in a state of shock as the ambulances continue to arrive along with fire trucks and assistance personnel to bring the victims here to Beekman Hospital. Jim,
we're looking at some tape here. We're looking at some tape here of one of the many people who apparently suffered minor injuries in the task in the crash. That's just again, this is just unedited raw tape that we're looking at. Unbelievable. The number of tragedies that happened here, personal tragedies. We will be sorting through in the next weeks, I'm sure. But right now, there is no more World Trade Center. John Rowland down in the newsroom. John?
Yeah, Jim, I just have some hard information, a little bit more of what you were talking about earlier. It was an American Airlines flight, one of them anyway, that hit the World Trade Center. It was Flight 11. It took off from Boston. It was on its way to Los Angeles. So we do now know the flight number of that American Airlines flight, of one of them. If you're expecting anybody on an international flight into our country, all of the international flights coming into our country are being diverted to Canada. So if you're expecting somebody coming into JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, all those airports closed obviously, those planes will be going into Canada. That's the latest information we have there. The Long Island Railroad back here in New York is stopping all of its trains into New York, and Brooklyn Metro North has stopped all the trains north of 125th Street in Manhattan. Once again, if you're able to, if you can donate blood, goodness knows how many people were killed today, but thousands killed and thousands more injured and wounded. So the blood banks are going to need the help from every New Yorker they can get. Jim, that's what we have right here from now.
All right, thank you very much, John. Joseph Jaffe, you've been sitting here rather patiently. The firm again, I forget.
Decision Strategies for Effect.
Decision Strategies for Effect. Now, put yourself, as President Bush now lands in Washington, put yourself in his shoes, if you would, as to how we go about answering this tragedy.
It's a large step to take, but I think the first thing you have to do is put yourself into a position to make government go on, to assure the public not to panic. Grief is absolutely something everybody's going to have, and shock everybody's going to have, but you have to make sure the country goes on. You have to take care that those other symbols of the country and those important parts of the country are protected, and then you have to put together what happens. You have to do it very slowly and very methodically, and you have to be careful to make sure that your guard is raised sufficiently that we can't have a repetition.
This may be premature to ask, but I mean, do you think the airports will be closed through the remainder of the week, or is it just for today? I mean, I know you say we have to go on and move on, but I mean, how do you safeguard our safety?
I won't presume to say I know even the beginning of the answer, but one of the answers is I don't think that we're going to wind up with our country at a standstill. I think that the protective measures that were put into effect long ago when the terrorist hijackings were ongoing, something we're going to have to reinstitute immediately. I think we're going to have to be very careful on the movement that we have and to control the movement, and I think we're going to have to just exercise a lot more care and diligence than we have. But you can at the same time stop.
All right, thank you very much. Again, Dick Oliver is down at NYU hospital this morning. Ollie?
Yes, Jim, I'm going to repeat what Mario said. The hospital continues to function. It is, I use the word overwhelmed, but I don't mean that in a negative way. It is handling any and all cases coming in here, but the majority of them being problems with breathing. I can't emphasize more the difficulty in breathing out of doors. As the wind blows, as emergency vehicles go by, the wind blows this soot, this ash, this white stuff, which makes it extremely hard to breathe. We see every now and then an emergency personnel person with oxygen mask on, firefighters with oxygen masks on, people with surgical masks on, trying to either get to the area or come out of the area. In general, though, the general public has been removed from downtown New York, south of the Brooklyn Bridge or Chambers Street, south of Chambers Street, and people continue to stream over the Brooklyn Bridge towards Brooklyn and also uptown, as your earlier reports had, to get away from the whole of downtown Manhattan.
Ollie, earlier on you used a very telling image about a snowstorm. Describe that for us again.
Sure. You look out the window here at downtown. I'm looking at the parking lot just west of me here with the World Trade Center just becoming a little bit more clear in the background. The cars in the parking lot are covered with what looks like 2 or 3 inches of, it looks like snow. It is not. It is ash from the debris. It is soot from the debris from the explosions of the World Trade Center. And the streets are covered with the white stuff as well. People have it all over their clothing. As I say, it makes seeing difficult. It makes breathing difficult. And looking out at a couple of places you're familiar with here, Jim, down on Beekman Street itself, the firehouse across the way, no one is on the streets. It's a ghost town, as I say, except for the emergency vehicles that appear every now and then.
Hey, Dick, this may be hard for you to see, but with the collapse of the World Trade Center, are there other buildings now in danger of collapsing?
No, I have no report of that. I think what went down, I understand that what went down fairly close to, as you know, on the east side of the World Trade Center, there's a huge plaza. I believe that it's the plaza that took the brunt of the falling debris. I have no reports of any other buildings in jeopardy. Right across the street, there's a big black hotel. I can't remember the name.
Is that the Marriott?
No. There's another one on the east side of the World Trade Center, big, tall, black building. It is a hotel. That is, I can see it now, still standing, of course. But as far as the damage to other buildings, I'm not aware of, well, there must be damage, but I'm not aware of any other buildings that are in trouble.
You know, reporters are people too, Ali. How have you fared as far as your breathing is concerned?
I was wearing, before I got on the phone here, wearing a surgical mask, as is everyone here. We're fortunate to be in a hospital which has these kinds of things. Other people are taking out their handkerchiefs, and one guy had his hat over his face and just trying to make it indoors. Once again, it is a ghost town here.
All right, Ollie. Thank you very much again, Ollie. Reporting from NYU Downtown Hospital, just a few blocks from the World Trade Center over there on the west side of Manhattan.
All right, Jim, I do think we have someone else on the phone that we all probably want to talk to. Joe Coffey, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Joe Coffey is a retired policeman with the NYPD. He is a terrorism expert. We thank you very much for joining us this morning. This, of course, devastating. Have you ever seen the likes of anything like this? And how did it happen?
The only thing that came close to this was the LaGuardia bombing, which I investigated back in 1976. But it was nowhere near this in volume, of course. And the human devastation there at LaGuardia Airport was incredible. And this reminds me of Pearl Harbor and the comments of the Japanese admiral, "We have awoken the sleeping tiger."
What do we do? How can we address this? How could something like this happen?
Well, years ago, when they tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan and subsequently the Pope, I made a comment back then that when you're dealing with people who are religious zealots like we have here, who are willing to give their lives up for the sake of the cause, so to speak, very difficult to stop, very difficult to police, and also very difficult to solve.
Joe, you're involved with a lot of terrorism intelligence. How did something like this slip by? Have you ever heard about this organization?
Well, there's so many organizations that take credit for these things after they happen. It's hard to filter through. But the FBI and the NYPD have a terrorist task force, which probably has the best database in the world regarding these type of people. This will be resolved by the FBI and the New York City Police Department.
Joe, have you ever heard of the Democratic Front for liberation of Palestine, and are they related at all to Osama bin Laden?
I haven't heard of them, but you got to remember something. I'm out of the business for a couple of years now, so I'm not privy to intelligence information. But as I said, I believe the FBI and the terrorist task force will, if they don't already know, find out the difference.
Joe, you know the FBI is always putting these people who are suspected terrorists under surveillance. Now, you're talking about 3 possible synchronized attacks on major landmarks in this country. How did that slip by?
Well, it's not very easy to explain, but as I said, when you're dealing with people who operate out of cells, they're very difficult to infiltrate. It's not like investigating the mob. It's not like investigating motorcycle gangs or the like. This is very sophisticated. These people, you must remember, they are willing to give up their lives for the cause that they seek. And this is one of the most difficult things, and it's not going to end here. There's more coming.
And that is the key here, Joe, you're saying, is when someone is willing to give up their life, it is very difficult to stop?
That's correct.
All right, Joe Coffey, retired NYPD terrorism expert. We thank you very much for joining us. And we go down to the newsroom now. John Rowland is there, and John, he has further updates.
All right, thank you very much. I just want to give you some the latest information about, first of all, about the 2 planes that were lost. The 2 in New York, they were American Airlines. One was Flight 11. It was a Boeing 767, Boston to LA, 81 people on that plane, plus the pilots. 2 pilots, and the second one was Flight 77. Again, this is American Airlines, Flight 77, a Boeing 757. That was out of Washington on its way to LA. 57 passengers on that flight, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. Now, in Pennsylvania, the plane that went down there, that was a Boeing 747. That's the largest passenger jet that has flown in our country domestically. That plane went down. That was a United Airlines plane. We don't know the flight number yet on that one, but it was a United Airlines plane. And I'm just looking now to see where it was from. I don't have that information, but it went down in Somerset County Airport. That's about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. That was a Boeing 747. Now, a couple of other things. Our country has been put on what's called DEFCON 5. That's the highest state of alert other than war. So across the country, we are on what is called DEFCON 5. Back here in New York, the 911 operators, if you're a 911 operator, I'm being asked to tell you to go to work. If you're on vacation, if you're off, whatever, report to work. They need all the 911 operators that they can get. And of course, if you're a pedestrian or you're planning to go out and about, don't. And any non-emergency vehicles, they want them out of Manhattan as soon as possible. I'm going to give you a local number for the blood bank here in our area. That's 570-3000. I know you're not sitting by ready to write down telephone numbers, but perhaps you should be. We're going to be giving you a lot of numbers as the day progresses. The local number for the blood bank in the area where Channel 5 is located is 570-3000. The 1-800 number is 933-BLOOD, 1-800-933-2566. And as someone pointed out to me, Jim, all of this is happening on a day with a date, 9/11. Jim?
Irony there as well, John. Also, there's an 800 number you can call if you want to donate blood, in case you can't get through to the one that John gave you. It's 1-800-933-BLOOD, B-L-O-O-D. I guess, yes, the control room is talking to me. What I'm told is the picture there to the left of your screen is Times Square. People gathered around the Jumbotron, the giant television set in Times Square, trying to get the latest word on these terrorist attacks.
Do you notice the streets? There are no cars on the streets. There are just people. Well, there are very few cars on the street. That is a sight that I've never thought I would see in New York City.
You see it occasionally during a very heavy snowstorm, but beyond that, not at all. Again, there's a little wider picture of the crowd in Times Square trying to get the latest word on this catastrophe from the Jumbotron down there. In case you are just joining us, or in case you are waking up or whatever, you're unaware of what's going on, we'll just recap it briefly for you. Shortly before 9 o'clock this morning, a terrorist-driven plane smacked into the upper floors of the second building of the World Trade Center. Minutes later, what you're looking at there is the consequence of those 2 terrorist attacks. the World Trade Centers collapsed. Minutes after the first attack, a second attack took place, and causing untold loss of life and deep tragedy. There's a picture of the second plane crashing into the Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. That was followed up by an attack, a plane driven into the Pentagon building housing our nation's military complex in Washington. All three planes were hijacked planes. All were large jets, 757, 767, 747, and the consequent
you know, Jim, we keep talking about how these attacks happened. Talk about the breach of security at the airports. 3 different airlines hijacked. How did that happen? You know, these men had to have some kind of weapon or something to hijack these planes with the pilots.
Maybe they did, or maybe they didn't. No, you know, you just don't know how that happened. Whether they had something that could go through a metal detector.
Joe,
yeah. To that point,
there are plastic weapons that you can carry that won't be detected. But the answer is that there's a false sense of security we enjoy at the airports. That the magnometers that are used really are high level, and they're not. There are a number that are, but there are an awful lot that aren't. There are a lot of that don't check any luggage at all. And this is one of the things we've really got to start to improve. If we want to protect our planes, we have to be, it'll take a little more time, it'll be a little bit problematic, and you'll resent it. But that's one of the things we're going to have to do. We have to start to make our airports more safe.
And of course, airports around the world have taken those precautions. I've tried to come out of the airport in Tel Aviv, and that is an experience.
It's like a 2-hour, you know, questioning period on every little thing that you do and what you've done in that country. But I've recently traveled to Europe, and for the first time in this country, I've had my bags really gone through, and they've really talked to me about who packed the bags, and did you leave these bags alone for any period of time? Those questions were never asked last year or the year before. This year, they seem to be really taking special care at the airports, but obviously not special enough that we had 3 planes hijacked today.
No, and the other point is I've said, and others who you talked to this morning say, if a person is bent on willing to give her life or his life to accomplish a task, it's very difficult to stop that. And what you have to do is make the impediment sufficient so at least they won't be successful and not aid them. And we haven't really done that. We haven't made ourselves security conscious. We take too much for granted and we think nobody will ever do us.
The land of the free.
And regrettably, the disaster today, the tragedy today shows that our awareness and what we took for granted, we can't take for granted again. We're going to really have to be much more mindful of how we're going to survive.
And we just have a little more information for the viewers. The plane that crashed in western Pennsylvania, we are now told, was United Flight 93 out of Newark, and it was headed for San Francisco. Now, was that one of the hijacked planes? Did some heroic pilot perhaps save an awful lot of lives in Washington? We don't know at this point, but we do know that it was United Flight 93 out of Newark, heading west, and could have been diverted to Washington quite easily if it crashed in western Pennsylvania, on its way to San Francisco.
I guess we haven't heard for security reasons whether the control towers had any kind of transmission with these pilots, whether they knew these pilots were in any kind of danger of being hijacked or anything like that.
But along with that line, if you look at where they were hijacked from, it had to be very well coordinated because it's East Coast hijackings in order to do East Coast damage, which raises the question of what else don't we know and what else could very well be coming.
As a security expert, there are other suspected terrorists in this country, in this city. What do you do now?
I would assume that the agencies dealing with that, the Terrorism Task Force, are doing the things that ought to be done to start to tighten up on those groups that they know. But these are cells in many instances, and you don't have the ability to have an organization can infiltrate one group and therefore know who everybody is. So you're going to have to be very careful and very mindful and start to look intensely and devote a lot of manpower to that.
Explain the way cells work, if you would, Joe.
What often happens, depending on the organization, is that different groups have different people involved. One cell, if you would, does not know who the other cells are. That way, if one group goes down, if certain people are captured, if certain people are taken into custody, they can't give up somebody else. Each works on its own, and there's a coordination. That type of structure has been growing, and worldwide that's been recognized. And if you look at the Mideast and you look at what's going on there, and not only in the Mideast but in the former Soviet republics, and as the conflict heightens.
Excuse me, Joe, I have to interrupt you once again, but we have a live news conference now from Logan Air Force Base in Washington.
245-0999. Secondly, family members can call a Mathport number 617-568-3100. We've also urging people not to come to the airport at this point in time. We've increased the shuttle buses from the terminals to the MBTA Blue Line stop, and the MBTA has increased the frequency of subway transportation. We are in close communication with the FAA, the FBI, State Police, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that's all I have right now.
Joe, you've got to tell us more about these planes that left this morning. What flights do you have reports on?
The flights, I cannot confirm or deny any flight numbers because I have not received official notification on any flight numbers.
So how can we get people to call these numbers? So everybody who's got a flight.
Okay, I do believe several of the media outlets are broadcasting several flight numbers. I believe they're broadcast flight number 11, American Airlines. I don't know at this point in time.
Were the first was hijacked?
I cannot confirm that.
Has the airport accounted for all outbound flights?
That's outside of the scope of the airport's responsibility. We're leaving it up to the FAA to conduct that activity.
Joe, what is the code? Joe, what is the code Fort Knox? We have reports of employees screaming Fort Knox around the airport at the time that the planes went into the World Trade Center.
I don't know what that means. Doesn't mean have any connotation here at Logan Airport.
What about planes that are flying in here? Are they being
All right, that's a news conference going forward at Logan Air Force Base up in Boston. This happened at about 8:45 this morning while we were on the air. It first broke. It's now some 3 hours and a few minutes later. Let's go back to that moment when we were on the air and the first crash took place.
Can I get you on here also?
What the hell was that?
It sounded like a plane crash.
There was the reaction on the part of...
Yeah, close to you!
Come to us, come to us. Come to us. Come to us. Hey, Beth, what is that? Somebody hit the World Trade Center or the...
It's a trade center.
The World Trade
Center.
Center. There's a fire on the upper floors.
It was just an explosion.
It looks like something...
You were listening to Dick Oliver and his cameraman at the moment that the first crash hit the World Trade Center. That was at 8:45 this morning. Oliver and his camera guy went and reported a little later than that, but then because part of our electronic gear is on top of the World Trade Center, he was knocked out. So then we were talking about cell phone. It is now some 3 hours later, and I think I hope we have seen the full dimension of the tragedy so far. Ali, are you there?
Jim, we were just able to talk to the president and CEO of NYU Downtown Hospital, who gave us a fill-in of what's going on as far as the hospital is concerned. They've opened up a second emergency room. They have been treating more than 250 people. Between 100 and 200 of them are people they've categorized in a green category in the triage. That means people who need immediate care. This is people who have cuts and lacerations. The majority of the other people being treated are for breathing problems as a result of the soot and the ash that hit here. Leonard Aubrey, the president of the hospital, says he was here during the '93 explosion at the World Trade Center. He says this is much, much worse than what happened there. He says that 3 dead on arrivals arrived here at downtown. One severely burned person was sent to Cornell Burn Center. Another neurological case was sent to NYU Hospital up on First Avenue. The doctor says that they're able to handle the people that have come into the hospital here adequately. They have opened up their supplies of oxygen, masks, bandages, and are dealing with the problems they have here. As far as the outside is concerned, the hospital is advising people not to go outside, or if you must go outside, to certainly wear a face mask because of the ash and the breathing problems. That's about it from now, Jim.
You know, I hesitate to ask this, Ali, but one would have to start looking in this direction. Have they made any arrangements for morgue facilities at the hospital?
I have not heard about that, Jim. As you know, our main morgue is up at the complex on 20th Street and First Avenue.
Over by Bellevue there, yeah?
Yeah, up by Bellevue. I have not heard about that. I will inquire about it. And would still need to know how many we lost in this thing. But if this is any indication, there have been a lot of people lost.
And the mayor, we are told, is down somewhere down there in the thick of things, and he was quoted earlier as saying that the loss of life has to be horrendous.
Mm-hmm. Jim, we have one of our reporters, James Ford, down on Broome Street. Let's go down to James now. James.
Well, we came up to Broome Street, actually, from Leonard Street, another 6 blocks in. We were about 10 blocks north of the World Trade Center complex when we saw a variety of things happen, including the implosion of both towers. I'm sorry to say that with our own eyes, we saw at least a half dozen people jump from the North Tower before it collapsed as well. A big concern among most of the people down there, and certainly we can attest that there were thousands of people in the street. A big concern for them was breathing in the debris from the collapsing buildings. As you can probably see from the video, that debris comes in a huge black gray cloud that comes up the streets as though it were a menace coming up a canyon, and everyone had to get out of that scene. Just what exactly it's comprised of, nobody can say. Certainly many people concerned. And another problem in the World Trade Center area, up to about 10 blocks away from the World Trade Center, was residual effects of the explosion. One building that we saw about 8 blocks north of the World Trade Center, well, there were 2 people that were injured from impact from the second explosion. In other words, when the Southern Tower had that explosion, other buildings in the area, they lost windows, they lost concrete, they lost part of walls, and all of that debris either went into the buildings on which they were attached and injured people in the buildings, or they came out from the building and injured people who are on the street. And in the pictures that you see, people are in the street being triaged by medical personnel, and that's another thing worth noting here. We saw people from as far away as central New Jersey, that is ambulances as far away as central New Jersey, eastern Long Island. Certainly emergency personnel have rallied the troops in this instance, and obviously there is a need. Many people on the street just breaking down into tears, walking around aimlessly, not knowing what to do in a situation like this, and feeling ultimately helpless. I'll say in contrast to that, though, there were many people who, despite their fear, oddly enough, were taking photographs, even joking, I'm sorry to say, about what they were seeing. I'm not sure that, at least in the first hour after the initial crash, that people really understood the severity of this. And there are a lot of onlookers. We saw one woman who was weeping while she was snapping photographs with her disposable camera. Very, very odd situation. We also saw a firefighter heading to the scene, and while his fire engine stopped, he brought out his own small pocket snapshot camera and took pictures of one of the towers as it continued to burn. This was adjectives. The pictures tell this story, certainly. We're trying to convey a sense of what it was like with the people that were there then. One person we talked to, we fed the tape back, was on the 85th floor. and was able to get out just before the building collapsed. He was in shock. Another person who was on the elevator in the lobby had to pull a man out as it's horrific to describe, but as that man's skin was burning and coming off of his body.
All right, James, thank you very much.
Let's hear from some of those people now. We talked with them.
I saw eight. I saw eight fall from the building when it first landed. First hit, when it first hit. Both towers are down?
It's terrible. I'm right.
That makes so many people must be killed now.
I'm right there. I went to the obstetrician with my girlfriend, and then we heard when this was going on. I'm like right there. I'm at the World Trade. I have a friend on the
south. Okay, what'd you see?
I was standing at BMCC.
What?
Borough Manhattan Community College. I'm standing on the corner watching, taking pictures. You can see the wings of the plane come from the south and hit the middle of the second building.
The second plane was like...
I think they were delivering bombs. The explosion went up on that last building. There was probably a bomb inside the plane. He saw it too. The explosion went up.
The explosion.
The
explosion went up like a mushroom. The second building.
The second plane was an old prop plane, like an old Dakota.
Say it again.
The second plane was like an old prop plane. It's a dual prop plane, like a Dakota or something like that. It wasn't a Dakota, but it came in low from over Newark Way, and you saw where the impact was, but it impacted, and then the explosion just blew out this way. Now some people are saying that there was 4 planes. And when the second one went down, it was another impact. Someone's just said there was 4.
Well, just tell me, stick to what you saw.
I saw the second one impact, and then the building just come down.
I heard one boom.
I saw also the impact there at 9:05, and also there were some people coming down. It's terrible. I saw 4 people coming down.
They're all jumping.
I saw a lot of people coming
at 9:05. It was 9:05.
How'd you get out then?
What happened was I was down in the basement. All of a sudden we heard a loud bang, and the elevator doors blew open. Some guy was burnt up, so I dragged him out. His skin was all hanging off. So I dragged him out and I pulled him out of the parking lot. This was what was left on it. Pulled him out. When I pulled him out, I looked up and the second bomb blew off. Just saw a big burst. And then I saw people jumping out of the buildings.
How long have you worked here at the World Trade Center?
About 6 months.
The place where you've been employed for 6 months was there.
Yes.
20 minutes ago. Your reaction seeing it is gone.
It's not the job, it's the people. It's the people that have died in there. That's what I'm worried about. The people that I can't see. I'm looking around looking for people and I don't see the people that I work with. The elevator operator.
And joining us right here live is a person who was at the World Trade Center when this happened. If you would, please, sir. First, your name, please?
Steve Porton.
Steve, how close were you? Just tell us what you saw.
The boat coming to work, and I was walking right next to the World Trade Center when the plane hit it. It was like a loud noise, almost like thunder or something like that. And one of the guys in the street started running. We were kind of stunned, and we looked up, and the top of the building was coming off, and debris was starting to fall all over the street. So we started running, and big pieces of metal were falling on the street, all over the street. You know, and there was some body parts down there, and then that calmed down, and then we walked to the other side, and then the other side of the building, a plane hit or something, and started running from that, and the debris started coming. I pulled a woman underneath a truck. There was a truck there, and it was a mess. And then the buildings collapsed and just spread dust all over them. We had to duck inside a JR Music just to get out of the dust. And
you're wearing a dust mask right now. What happened there?
They were passing them out down there. The whole area down there is, 2 inches thick and dust all over everything. And it was like a wall of debris and dust that was just traveling all. And I was, by that time, 4 or 5 blocks away.
Okay. Thank you for talking with us. We're sorry to meet you under these circumstances, but thank you, sir. We're going to send it back to the folks in the newsroom. We are live here at Broome Street at 6th Avenue. I'm James Ford, Fox 5 News.
All right, James, thank you very much. Well, let's take a step back now and make some sense out of this, as much sense as can be made, at least establish a chronology. John Rowland is down in the newsroom. John?
All right, Jim, first let me tell you that the group that we've been talking about, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, their leader is now denying that they had any part with this horrendous and despicable terrorist attack. The first of which happened around 9:50, about 10 to 10 this morning.
Just a few moments. Believed to be a plane crashed into the south tower of the World Trade Center.
That was Dick Oliver from Good Day, New York. He was in Lower Manhattan when the first plane slammed into the World Trade Tower number 2. Smoke and flames engulfed the top part of that building. The plane left a huge hole in the side of the building. Then about 20 minutes later, a second plane, again it was on a suicide run, it crashed into the World Trade Tower number 1.
There's another
You can
one.
see it. It went almost completely through the building. Now both towers are engulfed in flames and in smoke. Now because that plane hit lower, the structural damage caused by the impact of that jet caused the top of the tower number 1 to collapse first, shortly after 10 a.m. A charge of glass and steel came plummeting down. The smoke buried the surrounding buildings, it completely engulfed it. About a half an hour later, more again of the unthinkable, the North World Trade Tower number 2 came down. Began raining steel and glass everywhere, smoke everywhere, the damage unbelievable, incredible. And in between all the construction, the confusion, another terrorist attack, this time in Washington, near the Pentagon. Flames and smoke there. That building has been evacuated. That was a result of a U.S. Air Flight 737 out of Dallas into L.A. 50 people on board that plane. That plane also hijacked. 5 floors of the Pentagon have collapsed. We've got 4 planes down altogether now. A Boeing 757 in Pennsylvania. It was on its way from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. That's a United Flight 93. And then you have the 2 planes here in New York and the one that went down into the Pentagon. Jim?
Thank you, John. This is, I suppose, one of those days when we'll all look back and know exactly where we were when this happened. Linda Schmidt, you happened to be working out this morning.
Yeah, I was at Crunch Gym at 59th and 2nd. And of course, you know, you're working out and you're not really paying attention to what's going on the monitors because normally they have, you know, just frivolous stuff up there. But then all of a sudden everybody started gravitating towards the monitor and you could see of course the plume of smoke coming out of the World Trade Center, and you figure, okay, so there's a fire going on at the World Trade Center. And we have a lot of high rises around here, so you figure it's just a fire. 10 minutes later, I mean, just the groups of people that were just gravitating toward the monitor, because then at that point they had turned up the volume and they were announcing that a plane had actually crashed into one of the towers. This was before the second plane had actually crashed into the second tower. So immediately, of course, I rushed home and called the station and rushed right in. But you just couldn't believe it. I mean, everyone was just gasping in shock, just gathered around the monitors looking at this video.
Now, you have friends or family in the military?
I do. I don't want to get into specifics about who that is, but I do have a contact that works at Picatinny Arsenal, which is a research facility. It's about an hour outside the city here in Dover, New Jersey. They were immediately called into anti-terrorism briefings, and of course those are being held at military installations all across the country. And another facility that we have right close to us is in southern New Jersey, which is McGuire Air Force Base. And then of course one of the biggest military installations in the country is Fort Bragg, so everybody's on full alert with this.
I'm sure they are. As a matter of fact, John Rowland mentioned earlier that the country has moved to a DEFCON 5 alert, which is the highest state of alert that we can get short of out-and-out warfare.
Mm-hmm.
So James Ford said something earlier that I just want to comment on, and that is he couldn't understand how people were some smiling, some joking, some taking pictures of the tragedy. And it's been my experience that you never know how people are going to react during a tragedy. You're used to the movie version where everybody reacts in a predictable and familiar way, but you just never know how people are going to react individually to a tragedy as it befalls them. So I suppose that gives some understanding of the reaction on the part of people this morning when the tragedy struck.
You know what? Can we go to Adrienne Nardo right now, and she'll give us a wrap-up on what's open and what's not and what the traffic is like. Adrienne.
Rosanna, actually, most everything is closed as far as bridges and tunnels are concerned. All the airports remain closed in the United States, so you can try to check with your airline. Again, the phone lines are jammed. It is really tough trying to get out there. Try to stay off the phones unless it's an emergency call. Let's go to the maps and talk about what is happening. Again, reiterating that all of the airports are closed. No planes are leaving the United States. Now, we do have gridlock conditions around many of the airport areas, many of the crossings. That's obvious. Folks are trying to see if they can get into and out of the city. And again, they cannot do that right now. Let's talk about the George Washington Bridge first. It is closed in both directions. Again, the George Washington Bridge is closed in both directions. This delay has caused problems on Route 95 all the way up to Westchester County. Folks are just trying to travel on the roadways. You just need to stay home if you absolutely don't need to be on the roads and it's an emergency situation. Again, 95 is backed up Westchester County all the way down to the George Washington Bridge. The Lincoln Tunnel and the Holland Tunnels, they are closed in both directions. The Brooklyn Battery Tunnel is closed in both directions. The Verrazano Bridge, they are letting you get to Staten Island, but you cannot go to Brooklyn. And on the Verrazano Bridge, they're not charging you a toll to get out of the city to go Staten Island bound. All of the other Staten Island crossings, the Bayonne Bridge, the Outer Bridge Crossing, the Gulf Hills Bridge, they are all closed in both directions as a result of what is happening in the city. Obviously, gridlock conditions in lower Manhattan. If you're trying to use the East River crossings, a little bit better luck getting yourself to Queens. The Triborough Bridge to Queens is open. It is closed Bronx Manhattan bound. The Throgs Neck Bridge, the Whitestone Bridge, those are both open to Queens as well. On the inbound side of the Bronx, those crossings are closed. The Queens Midtown Tunnel is closed into the city. It is open to Queens, but gridlock conditions at the Midtown Tunnel trying to get out of the city. And again, any of these tunnels and bridges are subject to closure as they feel necessary. All train service is suspended into and out of Manhattan as far as the subways go. The PATH trains are concerned, Metro North, New Jersey Transit trains, LIRR. There is limited service in the outer boroughs on the subway stations. Again, no buses into and out of New York from New Jersey Transit. However, they are adding extra service out of Hoboken and Newark's Penn Station, and New Jersey Transit buses are operating within the state of New Jersey. They said they have limited service trying to get you out of the city on New Jersey Transit, but definitely give yourself extra time. If they could get you out of Penn Station, that would be great. One of your other alternates, the ferries, those are not operating into and out of the city, so you cannot take a boat as of right now. And again, watch for delays on any of the roadways heading into and out of the city. Also, roadways with views of the city, like Route 3. The New Jersey Turnpike has been closed northbound at exit 14. Too many cars on that roadway, so if you don't need to go anywhere and it's an emergency, please stay home. And obviously, parking rules, they're in effect, but it doesn't matter right now. Back to you, Rosanna.
Okay, thanks.
I'll take it, Adrian. Thank you very much. Let's get back downtown to Ground Zero, where James Ford still is. James?
That's right. We're at Broome and 6th Avenue, about 20 blocks north of the World Trade Center. We have come to this point having been in where all the smoke is. Now, joining me right now are two gentlemen who were on the other side of the World Trade Center. In other words, they've had to come this far north of the World Trade Center just to get to where they need to go, and I can certainly attest you gentlemen are covered.
Talk better.
Talk about what you've seen.
It's when the buildings went down, you could not see. You could not see. It was as if there was a volcano, which essentially is what it was in reverse. Dust, 2-3 inches thick on the streets. Paper from every firm in the Trade Center. I saw Port Authority stationery, law firm stationery. Broken glass, pieces of the building, vehicles on the street that had been responding to the first incident, damaged, blown glass, bent bumpers, bent fenders. It was devastating.
And certainly there's a concern for you for ingestion of...
We stopped at an ambulance and got these breathing masks, and they were kind enough to give them to us.
Talk to us for a second just to how important it was to be... We had to escape north away from the big cloud. You were in it. Talk about how important it was to have some sort of dust mask.
It was critical. You could not, I don't know what the long-term effect of whatever is in that dust would have been, but the short-term effect, running eyes, blinded, and you couldn't breathe, and it was awful. I mean, I can't say more than that. These were critical.
They evacuated the courthouse. We were in court. They evacuated the courthouse. We were escorted.
Which is at the Customs House, right?
The old Customs House.
So about how far south of the World Trade Center? Is that south?
About a block or two south of the World Trade Center. We were in the courtroom when the building collapsed. And when the building collapsed, the first building collapsed, they immediately evacuated the building. They sent us out through emergency stairwells, and they sent us out to the street, not knowing what was out there. I could not see. and I basically followed the perimeter of the building around until I was able to find a door back into the courthouse. And one of the marshals was kind enough to let me into the courthouse, and they let other people in the courthouse as well to escape the ash, and you couldn't see the heat and the terrible situation.
All the lobbies
outside.
of all of the office buildings in the area are filled with people who came down, tried to get out, found it very inhospitable, and they're congregating in lobbies all over the downtown area.
Let me ask one other thing, gentlemen. You've already come about 30 blocks to get to where we are from south of the World Trade Center. Where we encountered both of these gentlemen walking north. Where are you going?
My first stop is Bleecker and 6th, where my kids are in school, and my next stop is 57th and Madison, where my office is, after I drop my kids off at home if school is out. And we do what we've got to do.
Wow, if I may say so, both of you, when we encountered you, looked pretty dazed. How would you describe your state right now?
Not dazed, just clear, maybe a bit tired because it's getting hot and it's getting humid. But other than that, no adverse effects.
I had my sunglasses on and I had a mask on, which I took off about 4 or 5 blocks ago.
Okay. Thanks very much for talking with us. Best of luck, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Again, we'll wrap it up here at this spot for right now on 6th Avenue and Broome Street. Back to you in the studio.
All right, James, thank you. And those two gentlemen, they've been through an ordeal, but they were two of the lucky ones. Take a look at this video we've got here. These people that you're about to see right now were stuck on the building before the collapse of the World Trade Center. Do we have that lined up? Yes, there's the video you're looking at. These people waving frantically, trying somehow to get attention, somehow to save themselves from the inferno all around them. Moments later, the building collapsed.
You know, Jim, looking at this video we were discussing earlier, it is so eerie to look at this and know that those people probably did not survive.
It would be highly unlikely.
Some of those people actually jumped. My husband's office is close by, and he said he saw people actually either jumping or falling.
Some people
from
in
the building.
desperation, what do you do? Yeah.
Right.
We are joined in the studio now by David Harris. David is with the American Jewish Committee, who has paid special attention to terrorism, international terrorism over the years. David, good morning. I'm sorry we're joining under these horrific circumstances. But I suppose the first question is, what now?
I think the first thing now is for the country to come together, and clearly it is. This is an act of war against the United States. It's a time for us to stand as one, as a nation, and it's a time for us to reach out to all the victim families and to assert that in moments like this, we are Americans. We stand shoulder to shoulder with each other in solidarity with our government and in sympathy with the victims.
Have we been lax in our security? Or is this something that could not have been avoided?
I think the temptation by some would be to second guess. Oh, we could have, we should have. This is not a moment for that. I think what's clear, though, is that Americans have never taken the issue of terrorism all that seriously. We've had terrorist acts over the years, both against targets in the United States and American targets overseas. And for a period of time thereafter, we focus attention. But then we begin to drift away, we begin to think about other things, and we don't see it as a permanent, sustained threat. I fear that today will mark the beginning of a whole new approach to the issue of terror.
If you stay there just one second, please, David, but we have some more developments in the story from John Rowland down in the newsroom. John?
All right, thanks, Jim. Again, all of this beginning about 9 o'clock this morning here in Lower Manhattan. A horrific, horrendous sight, despicable attack by terrorism. Again, the one group that we had talked about earlier that we thought had claimed responsibility for it is now denying it. Yasser Arafat coming out and condemning this terrorism. Governor Pataki has said that this horrific incident at the World Trade Center, which appears to be part of a coordinated terrorist attack, is a tragedy of unspeakable proportions, a crime against all Americans and all decent people around the world. He's been in contact with the president and the mayor to ensure that the appropriate emergency response is as effective and well coordinated as possible. Con Edison, by the way, is telling us that the terrorist attacks that knocked down both the World Trade Center buildings is causing outages in Lower Manhattan. Services is out between West Street and Hudson River south of Chambers Street. Gas and steam service in that area have also been interrupted. the planes that went down, we have some late information about two United flights. United Flight 93, that was a Boeing 757. It left Newark at 8 o'clock this morning on its way to San Francisco. 38 passengers, 2 pilots, 5 flight attendants. That flight is the one that went down near Pittsburgh. The second plane was United 175, a Boeing 767. That left Boston at 8 o'clock this morning on its way for Los Angeles. There were 56 people on that flight, 2 pilots, 7 flight attendants. And the 2 United jetliners that crashed Thursday morning, one near Pittsburgh, the company isn't saying about another one of its planes that crashed, but didn't say where. And there was word that the flight that crashed to the Pentagon in Washington may have been a U.S. air flight or another United flight. We're getting conflicting information on that. The Pentagon, of course, attacked as part of this terrorism attack, Jim, and 5 floors of the Pentagon have collapsed, and goodness knows how many people were killed there. A horrendous amount of people killed here in New York, the word used by Mayor Giuliani. Information now about the Long Island Railroad. It's running limited eastbound services to get people out of New York City. Nothing coming in to get people out of New York City. Trains are leaving from Flatbush Avenue, Brooklyn Hunters Point Avenue in Queens. There is no service from Manhattan. The LIRR says passengers for the Port Washington branch should use the Woodside Avenue station in Queens. That's the latest information we have for you from here, Jim.
Thank you very much. We have been sitting here in the studio, have been looking at the pictures, but not feeling viscerally the experience. Here are some people who did.
Just come bear straight towards the World Trade Center. You say you noticed that it was lower than normal at the time, and we just felt a big explosion. I didn't know what after the fact that we talked about, knew it was a plane. I was on the way down. It was pretty calm. There's some small fires, and from the 85 on below, there were small fires and some floods, but it wasn't that bad. And I had just gotten out of the building. I was crossing the street when I heard some rumbling. I saw someone coming off the top of the building. I just ran. I didn't know where to go. My first reaction was to go down into a subway stop just to get some cover, because I felt this cloud of all this stuff, the stuff coming down, the debris, and I thought that was the smartest thing, but I got stuck in there for a while. It was pitch dark.
The explosion went up on that last building. There was probably a bomb inside the plane. He saw it too. The explosion went up.
The explosion. The explosion went up like a mushroom. The second building.
The second plane was an old prop plane, like an old Dakota.
Say it again.
The second plane was like an old prop plane. It's a dual prop plane, like a Dakota or something like that. It wasn't a Dakota, but it came in low from over Newark way, and you saw where the impact was, but it impacted, and then the explosion just blew out this way.
I saw 4 people coming down.
They're all jumping.
I saw a lot of people coming
at 9:05. It was 9:05.
How'd you get out then?
What happened was I was down in the basement. All of a sudden we heard a loud bang, and the elevator doors blew open. Some guy was burnt up, so I dragged him out. His skin was all hanging off. So I dragged him out and I pulled him out of the parking lot. This was what was left on him. Pulled him out. When I pulled him out, I looked up and the second bomb blew off. Just saw a big burst. And then I saw people jumping out of the buildings.
All right, those are some of the eyewitnesses. We're joined now by another eyewitness. She joins us in the studio. Kathleen Connolly was in the World Trade Center when the blast took place. Is that correct, Kathleen?
Yeah, I work in 7 World Trade, and we heard and felt some sort of explosion. And, we were kind of joking, this girl, well, that wasn't the subway, and next thing I hear people from the other side kind of screaming. So my coworker just said, let's go. So we grabbed our bags and we just went downstairs, and our lobbyway is very big and is with glass, and we face the plaza where the World Trade Center is, and there was people mulling about, and we just said, well, we don't want to stand here, we want to get out. We went down to the next level, and then a side door, someone opened the side door, and we got out through the garage way and just kept going. And I don't know what happened to those people in there. We just kept walking, and we saw some lady scream and cry. And we crossed the street, and I said, oh, maybe somebody fell down. Fell out of the building. We looked up. Within seconds, the second explosion went off. I felt the heat on my face. I grabbed her. We ran. She fell. I picked her up. We just kept running and running. I didn't even know what happened. I thought it was a bomb. Until I was halfway uptown, and we heard people talking. That's how I found out it was planes. I had
How did
no
you get
idea.
up here?
I walked. I knew, my sister works here, so I knew it would be open. I'm like, she works in a newsroom. Probably they're covering it. I know one place will be open. I don't know how to get home. We definitely didn't want to go. I had no idea the subway was closed.
So you walked from World Trade up to E67?
Yeah. And we were very surprised that we saw so many people walking. We're like, why are people walking? Like,
what were the streets like? Were people just milling around by the World Trade Center, or were they trying to get out of there?
It was both. I mean, my friend and I, my coworker, we just ran for our, I mean, literally, when you say you're running for your lives, we were running for our lives. We were just running. And we didn't look back until we were way, way clear. Then there were some people milling about, and we couldn't understand it. We're like, well, we're not doing that. We're just going to run. And it's true. I heard some people talking, like people taking pictures, and they were. And, maybe people do strange things.
They do.
Well, they probably were in shock as well.
You were on 7 World Trade Center. That's one of the smaller buildings in the complex. What floor were you on?
20.
Did you have trouble getting down the elevator?
We didn't go in the elevator. We went directly to the stairs.
You went right down this, as you should in a situation like that.
And I thought to myself, I don't know how they're getting down the stairs in the bigger buildings, because it was pretty calm. I'm a little not calm, but it was pretty calm. We walked down there, but then all of a sudden, when you see so many people, you start to get a little claustrophobic. And we just said, we just can't leave.
When you were going down in the staircase, were other people going down with you? Lots of people down with you?
There was people, but it wasn't as much as I thought. I think people were really confused because all of a sudden nobody was around. So you didn't get nobody told you what to do or where to go. Everybody just made up their own minds to run.
Because usually you're supposed to stay, especially in a high-rise, stay on that floor unless the fire is on that floor.
There was no communication whatsoever.
So what was the situation like in the stairwell, though? Were there lots of people just flocking and racing down the steps, or what was going on?
And I think what happened was, again, nobody really knew what happened. We were like one of the first people to leave, and I think afterwards, I think more people came down.
So at first it was just trickling out.
There was no smoke by us, and yes, it was trickling out. But by the time I got to the bottom, a lot of the building had already congregated. So I'm like, this is not going to house the entire building. I mean, there's people just going to just start smashing each other.
How far did you get when you heard the second blast?
To be honest with you, I was wondering the same thing. I'm like, I don't know how far I am, but I did feel the heat of the blast. By the time we stopped running, and it was like, I didn't look behind me, but my friend tripped. And luckily nobody trampled her, and I kind of helped her up a little. But
there were lots of people running in that direction?
There was lots of people running. I looked up and I was like, uh-oh, we better get up, and we finally veered off, going east a little bit, because everybody was on that one street. So we're like, I don't want to spend the whole time on the street, let's kind of...
Do you think people were helping one another as much as they possibly could, or was it every man for themselves?
Yeah, we helped a couple people on the way out. Again, it was kind of calm, because when we first left, we were like, okay, we're gone. Everything's okay. Kind of, like the worst happened.
And you weren't quite sure what had really happened at that point.
I had no idea that it was plane. I had no clue. I thought it was just, someone said a generator, someone said a bomb. It didn't matter to me. I just ran. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did the thought of terrorism hit you at any point?
After we started walking, I said, oh, well, America's in trouble. Somebody's not happy with us. So,
After that second blast, you figured that it was a bomb and terrorism.
For sure. And then we were walking, and then someone said something about the Pentagon. We were just in shock. We just didn't believe.
Did you try at any point to get a taxi or to take a subway?
No, it wasn't even an issue. I mean, she's in the Bronx. She's like, I'm walking the Bronx. I'm like, I'm walking the Woodside. I'll see it, We didn't even think about it.
Well, we can see that you were really shaken up about this.
I'm sorry.
We appreciate you coming up
shaking,
here. Yeah,
I'm just worried about my coworkers. I don't know what happened to anybody. I saw 5 people with me. I left the building. It was just me and Maria. I have no clue what happened to anybody, so I'm a little nervous.
Well, let's hope they're okay.
Well, you were not injured yourself, I take it?
No, I'm telling you, I feel like I'm the luckiest person on earth. I probably missed even just a minor injury by minutes.
Did you have, we heard reports earlier from a lot of people who were in the area at the time that because of all the debris that was pouring down on their heads, there was great trouble breathing. Did you get out of it before that happened?
I was out of it again, I was one of the first people out of the building, and we didn't look back. We just kept going. And then probably around 42nd Street or Grand Central by the time we got in that area. That's when people started.
What are your thoughts as you look at that picture there?
I don't know what to think. I saw it, I didn't see that part, because that looks like it's the collapse. But that tower that is still standing, I saw from my window, and I had to look up, and I saw the fire, and that's when I ran, got, you know, stupidly, whatever, I got my bag, you know, and called for Maria, and she was already in the stairwell, and we just hit the road. By the time we got out, I turned around, and it looked like the second explosion was like, I don't know if it was bigger or what, but I just saw this big ball of fire, and we just felt it. Like, I'm like, this must be like what war is like, or I don't know what, and we didn't think, we just ran. And everybody ran. She lost her shoes. You know, it was horrible.
You're just running on adrenaline, I guess.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
I know it's incidental at this point, but did you still have your bag? You hung onto the bag. Again, you never know.
Well, I said,
what people
I don't have any
going
money
to do and how they're going to react.
Yeah, how am I going to get?
Right.
You know, if I have to need money for anything or my identification, we knew we weren't going to make it back in the building. And again, at that very moment, it was so confusing. There were some people in the building, some people on my floor, some people not. There was no announcement. We didn't know.
Did you see people outside, like rescue workers or policemen or firemen, directing you, telling you to move on?
That was a little too early. You know, like we were out, again, very early. And, but there was tons of people going up the street. There were tons of emergency vehicles, signs, everything. And what I was confused about, there were cars still coming towards our way. And we're like, they really should not be coming this way. They should be off the road, taxis, trucks, everybody, people walking that way. Well, like, you know, are you insane? Get away, you know.
And these weren't emergency vehicles, they're just...
just cars going that way, and I don't know, you know, I don't know why.
Well, the further you made it out alive.
Me too.
Yeah, absolutely. The further you got away from that area, though, and you're walking on the street, what was the reaction of people walking on the street at that point? I mean, did a lot of people seem to know what was going on, or were they oblivious to what was happening?
The further away I got, the more people knew. Because when you're in the middle of it, like, again, we didn't really know what was going on. So, and there were a lot of people crying, there were a lot of people in shock. So, you know, I saw like one or two women who had collapsed, but, you know, luckily there were good Samaritans who, you know, were already at her aid and helping her out. So,
Well, thank you. Just relax a little bit. Right now, we're going to take you and make you listen to a tape. Ted Kennedy and Laura Bush were at a hearing on Capitol Hill, and here's what they had to say after they heard about all these attacks.
Hello.
Good morning. All of us deplore the acts of terrorism that we have seen in these past minutes, and our hearts reach out to all of those who have suffered, lost their lives, and are injured right now, and all of us reach out as Americans to the brave rescue workers that are attempting to help our fellow citizens. We, out of respect for those efforts, have postponed our hearing this morning. We underline the point that it is postponed. We are not going to see the business of America deferred because of terrorism, whether it's in education or in other area of public policy. We're looking forward to hearing from the First Lady on a subject matter which is of central concern to all families in this country, and because of her experience and her leadership, this committee and the Congress and the American people would have benefited greatly from her comments. And we will look forward to an early reappearance by the First Lady for this committee on the subject of early education. And Mrs. Bush, we recognize.
You heard from the President this morning, and Senator Kennedy and Senator Gregg and I both join his statement in saying that our hearts and our prayers go out to the victims of this act of terrorism, and that our support goes to the rescue workers, and all of our prayers are with everyone there right now. Thank you all.
All right, a hearing postponed on the Hill by Senator Kennedy and accompanied by First Lady Laura Bush, giving their reactions to the tragedies of the morning. John Rowland?
All right, Jim, I'm just trying to make some sense for you about all the effects that have happened here and across the country because of these terrorist attacks. The hearings in Washington not only postponed, the Capitol evacuated all the major government buildings in Washington, D.C. being evacuated, as well as here in New York, Connecticut, and in New Jersey. The baseball games across the country all postponed for tonight. These terrorist attacks in Manhattan have shut down the subway lines. They've crippled cell phone service. They forced the evacuation from Wall Street to the United Nations. Lower Manhattan closed. Only emergency people allowed there now. Thousands of people walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. Primary election is called off. Airports are all closed. Trading on Wall Street has been suspended. The United Nations building has been evacuated. Offices throughout Manhattan are closed. Kids are being kept in schools because their parents can't get to them. Every payphone in the city, of course, is lined up. The traffic problems are incredible, difficult to describe. Hudson River crossings are closed going into the city, and the Jersey Turnpike is closed northbound above Interchange 11 in Woodbridge. Turnpike Authority spokesman says that motorists leaving the city are being waved through the congested toll plazas. Nobody's taking any tolls today. Southbound traffic is allowed over the length of the Turnpike. Long Island Railroad services, all the train service into and out of the Penn Station and Flatbush Avenue. Brooklyn service is suspended until further notice. Limited train service from the LIRR east of Jamaica Station, limited service between Port Washington and the Flushing Main Street stations. The MTA says there is no subway service into or out of Manhattan, temporarily suspended because of power problems. Buses are operating in some cases. Emergency bus service plans are being put into effect. All the bridges, Jim, all the tunnels outbound, with the exception of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, at the direction of the governor, no fares, as I said, are going to be collected either way. You can get out of Manhattan, you cannot get in, and they're asking you, please don't even try. Jim, back to you.
Ali, thank you very much. John, thank you very much. I'm so used to dealing with my partner in the morning. Linda, you talking about some military installations?
Yeah, that's right, Jim. I just got off the phone with a close contact at Picatinny Arsenal, which is a research facility about an hour outside the city here. It's in Dover. They have closed for the day. Now, as I told you guys earlier, after this thing happened, they immediately went into emergency anti-terrorism briefings. They are still involved in those meetings, and this is a couple of hours afterward. Also, military bases all across the country have been shut down, and they are on full alert today. And of course, at every military installation right now, they have the anti-terrorism briefings going on.
As John Rowland mentioned earlier this morning, the city is on DEFCON 5, a state of alert that is the most serious just before all-out war. So that's where we are right now as a response to these terrorist attacks this morning. Dick Oliver was down in the thick of it earlier this morning. Ali, are you still there?
Yes, Jim. We're at NYU Downtown Hospital. Just to give you an update of the hospital's activities, they've treated more than 250 patients with injuries in breathing and cardiac problems. The hospital, which, as you know, is located in the shadow of the World Trade Center, just a half a dozen blocks away, established a second emergency room and a command post to keep medical personnel advised as to arriving patients. Now, at least 3 people were dead on arrival at the hospital. 2 others had to be transferred, one a severe burn injury. The hospital's president and CEO, Leonard Aubrey, says that immediate treatment was given to 200 people suffering from cuts, lacerations, and other traumas, some with severe chest pains and smoke inhalation. Meantime, those who arrived at the hospital were given face masks and bottled water, all of them, by the way, covered with soot and ash from the debris. The hospital president, who was here in 1993 when the World Trade Center bombing occurred, said the hospital at that time treated about 200 people, but with very milder injuries. He says today's catastrophe was much, much worse. Jim?
And I'm sure you've been telling us, in a sense, the positive things, in the sense that the injuries that something can be done about. The word from the mayor earlier was that he has said he has a sense of the horrendous number of lives lost. We haven't even begun to talk about that yet, about morgue facilities that are around, because if you had the 2 largest office buildings on the island of Manhattan, both totally demolished, you can't begin to believe the number of lives that must have been lost in that tragedy.
Jim, another thing, I mean, so much of the city is shut down as far as the transportation goes. Something else that we want to alert people to, baseball games today have been canceled. And also, regarding President Bush and his whereabouts, the Secret Service is not saying at this point where the president is.
I suppose that might be true of the mayor as well, since we've not heard from him.
Usually the mayor is at the scene immediately, and he's always holding a press conference, certainly within an hour of something, you know, horrible happening, and something of this proportion. You know that they must be keeping him safe and sound just in case there are any other lunatics out there.
And as you know, ladies, the city's emergency facility, the so-called bunker, is down there in the World Trade Center. So we don't know what kind of shape that is despite all the precautions taken to secure that facility. It may have been damaged as well. The communications facilities may have been. The mayor may be there, he may not be, but we have heard from him. We haven't seen him directly, but we have a quote from him telling us about the loss of light.
To describe the level of anger that you have.
No, no, I'm told we have the mayor on the phone talking to someone, and we're listening in.
People that were affected by this. There's no reason for this. You never thought you would live to see.
I couldn't agree more, sir. Thank you for joining us. New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani. On what was to be an election day, the mayor not up for re-election because of term limits, but the
sounds like a radio station that the mayor must have called into.
And Jim, the bunker that you're just talking about, the Office of Emergency Management, is actually, and you know this, but I just want to clarify this for the audience, is actually across the street from the towers that went down.
We understand, I am just told now, that the mayor himself was in some way trapped for about 20 minutes. Either in or near the World Trade Center, that whether it was for his own safety or whether he was trapped inside the building somehow, we don't know. But we are trying, as you can well imagine, to get the mayor on the phone as soon as we can, and as soon as we're able to reach him, we'll give you the latest on that aspect of this tragedy.
We should mention that, you know, a lot of our TV crews are a few blocks away from Ground Zero, the World Trade Center, because, you know, the rescue operations, the police department, the fire department, they don't want anything, you know, hurting their way, you know, getting people out and getting people to hospitals. So we're a few blocks away from the scene, trying to get as much information as we possibly can to you about your loved ones and just about the situation down at the World Trade Center.
You know, Rosanna, one thing, too, that people really don't think about, because we're here, we're on the air, we're bringing them information, is that we have people who live outside of Manhattan, that live in the other boroughs, that can't get to work. Others, I ran into Alan Horowitz, one of our cameramen, and he walked 5 miles from Queens to get here. In order to get here, to get to a live truck, to get to a location, to be able to bring people the information that they need to know about what's going on downtown.
Well, the same thing with our executive producer, Joe Kleins. He lives on Long Island, and he wound up walking across the 59th Street Bridge and then, you know, all the way to work. And I mean, you know, we're journalists, we're supposed to be objective, but we live in this city, we're human beings, we're raising our children here, and so we're just as concerned as anybody else about what's happening in our town right now.
And trying just to get the information out there to you as quickly as we can. We were talking about this earlier too, Rosanna. I mean, when you look at this video, it is so hard to believe that this is something that's actually happening. It looks like some type of action thriller movie.
It is surreal.
Not reality.
It is surreal. I mean, you talk about the World Trade Center, a landmark in our city, a symbol to the world. It's a symbol of strength and power wiped out from our skyline forever. And at the same time this is happening, another attack, another terrorist attack in Washington.
Right, at the Pentagon, collapsing 5 stories there as well. And some of the video that we were looking at earlier, just showing those people after the first plane crashed into the first tower, and people hanging out the windows, just, you know that they were just hoping that someone was going to be able to get to them in time to rescue them. And a short time later, it collapses. So you can just imagine the devastation and the number of people who lost their lives today or who were seriously injured. It's absolutely mind-boggling, just incredible.
And, you know, some people have brought up that this is a symbolic day, too, primary day, a day where our country goes and casts their votes, one of the great freedoms that we have in this country, canceled for the day.
Okay, Rosanna, they're telling us now that Dick Oliver is on the phone. He's been working this story and has been downtown since this thing happened about 8:45 this morning. Dick, are you there?
I'm here.
What's the latest from down there, Dick?
Well, I'm at the NYU Downtown Hospital, formerly Beekman Hospital, which is about a block and a half away from City Hall and about 6 blocks away from the World Trade Center. This was the central point for receiving patients, not only from the area of the World Trade Center, the surrounding area, but people who were suffering from the debris, from the ash and the soot that still covers the area here. I'm looking outside the window of the hospital now, and it looks as though a snowstorm occurred with 2 or 3 inches of snow all over the cars. It is a ghost town down here. As we reported earlier, after the second explosion, the police and other emergency officials moved people out of the Wall Street and downtown area north. People piled onto the Brooklyn Bridge. Traffic was limited on the bridge, and people just poured over and headed north of this area. We are looking at a ghost town now. Here at the hospital, 3 people arrived at DOA very early on. 2 people had to be transferred to other hospitals because of burns and other serious problems. The main function of the hospital here is to deal with people with severe breathing problems. The hospital has handed out face masks for people to breathe through. The hospital's the CEO and president, Leonard Aubrey, told me that he was here for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, and that this thing is much worse. He said there were much more minor injuries at the earlier explosion. Some 200 people were treated. So the hospital has established a second emergency room to deal with some 250 cases as a result of this catastrophe.
Who has some up-to-date information for us as well. He's in the newsroom. John.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Linda. Let me just give you the latest information now that we have from around the world on this situation. Overseas, Britain has placed all of their government facilities in the UK on high alert. In California, the government workers there have been all sent home. The buildings there have all been shut down. Several states have closed their schools, offices, all the landmarks. The border between our country and Mexico has been closed. New Jersey Transit has halted all of its rail service in the Northeast Corridor, New Jersey Coastline and Raritan Valley Coastline. That service was suspended, we're told, at the request of the authorities. Here in